Hello students and welcome to the lecture. As we know that we are covering the scheduled and the tribal areas, right? This is the topic on which we have been discussing right now. Basically, within this particular series of scheduled and the tribal areas, these all are the topics that we have scheduled for the discussion. Okay? Like starting with the introduction part, thereafter the scheduled areas in India and overview of it, then the criteria for the identification of the scheduled areas, then constitutional provisions and the governance, then concerns that are related to the scheduled areas, then the administration of the scheduled areas, okay, then the scheduled tribes, then the general concerns of the tribal community, then addressing the challenges, then the significance of the indigenous communities, thereafter the problems that are being faced by the tribal groups, the conclusion and the administration of the tribal areas. Okay, so these are the topics that we had scheduled for the discussion. If we talk about the topics that we have covered so far, we have done with the introduction part, we have done with the scheduled areas in India, an overview of it, we have done with the criteria for identification of scheduled areas, we have done with the constitutional provisions and the governance. All right. The topic on which we have been discussing right now, this is the concerns related to the scheduled areas. Okay. And the topic that we are left with, these are the administration of the scheduled areas, scheduled tribe, general concerns of the tribal community, addressing the challenges, significance of the indigenous communities, problems are being faced by the tribal groups, conclusion part, administration of tribal areas. Okay, so this is the picture that we have created so far altogether. All right, basically in this lecture we will start from where we had left in the previous one. So in the previous one, basically we had seen the denial of rights, right? That is what we have seen. Basically, we have discussed the two major acts like the right to fair compensation and transparency in the land acquisition. That is what we had discussed. Thereafter, the Rehabilitation and the Resettlement Act of 2013 we had discussed. Then the Biological Diversity Act 2002 we had discussed. Okay. So I hope you have revised the previous lecture in the well enough manner before you have come for this lecture. As many times I have told you, that is for your own benefit. If you are doing this on the regular basis, the thing will be much more beneficial for you. If you are not doing this on the regular basis, the thing will be hard for you. Okay. Thereafter, if we move forward while discussing the concerns that are related to the scheduled areas. Okay. Then basically, now we are going to talk about the impacts on communities. Okay. What is the impact of this community? Like we know, almost the 59% of the tribal population lies outside the purview of Article 244, which means various safeguards that have been promised to them under the Article 244, 1 and 2. All right. These provisions are not applicable on them. Okay. And basically when we are talking about the Article 244, then I had told you Article 244 having the two clauses, sub-clauses basically you can say, like the Article 244.1 and the Article 244.2. Just tell me, Article 244.1 deals with which schedule? To answer this question, you will have the 30 seconds and your time starts now. Alright, the 10 seconds have been passed off. Last 20s are remaining. Last 10 seconds. Okay, the time is going to be up and the time's up. So Article 244 subclause 1 basically deals with the Schedule 5. And we know Schedule 5 is the schedule of the Indian Constitution that deals with the administration of scheduled and tribal areas in 10 states of this country, right? The next question that I'm going to ask you is also relevant with that field. Article 244 subclause 2 deals with which schedule? Again, I'm repeating, Article 244 subclause 2 deals with which schedule? To answer this question, you will have 30 seconds. Time starts now. Ten seconds have been passed off. Last 20s are remaining. Last 10 seconds are there. All right, the time's up. So the correct answer is sixth schedule. Sixth schedule is the schedule of the Indian Constitution that deals with the scheduled and tribal areas in the 4 northeastern states, and these states are Assam, Tripura, Meghalaya and Mizoram. Sorry, Manipur and Mizoram. Assam, Tripura, Manipur and Mizoram. Alright, these are the things. So basically, what is the impact of this denial of rights? So denial of these rights having the significant impact on the socio-economic development and well-being of these communities. Socio-economic means, like as I have told you, not nowadays, since the ancient history, then the medieval history, these were living with the forests. Even when it's a time of modern history, when the Britishers came to India, however, the Britishers tried to get them into the mainstream, but they got failed. Why? Because the Britishers' approach behind them was not for the welfare and all this kind of things and this kind of stuff. Basically, why the Britishers wanted to get indulged in the mainstream? Because mostly of them were practicing the jhuming cultivation. And second, because the Britishers wanted the forest of these tribals. Okay, so because of this, they tried, but they got failed. Thereafter, we know when we got independence, basically, we had felt that it is our moral responsibility that if we are talking about the sustainable development and we are talking about the development for all, then these people are also the one that must be developed, that must having the share or must having the contribution in the growing economy, right? So that's why we formulated the Article 244, Clause 1, 5th schedule, Article 244, Clause 2, 6th schedule. Okay, so that we could provide the special kind of administration or the self-governance provisions, okay, in order to provide the socio-economic development of them, as well as ensuring the well-being of these communities, but maintaining their custom and traditional rights as it is. It means that irrespective of Britishers, like when the Britishers tried to get them into the mainstream, the Britishers adopted the oppressive policies. Like the Britishers were trying to indulge them into the mainstream, indulge them into the modern society, okay, at any cost. Okay, and the Britishers had no policy for their traditions and customs. But in India, when we tried to do it by ourselves or through the power of constitution, then the things were not as were with the Britishers, right? So basically, Article 244 contains the various socio and economic things. Socio means like the protection of their custom, traditions, language, and other kind of things. Economic means like how they could be benefited economically and could have the share in the economic development of the country while having the access to their traditions and all. Also the well-being. Why? Because as I had told you, the tribals, the scheduled people, they have been the most neglected segment of this country since the ancient and medieval, even in the modern times. Why? Because those were the people who were living in the forest. Okay, those were the people who were living in the remote areas, and those were the people who had nothing to do with the modern ways. All right. So when we try to compare the scheduled and the tribal areas with the other areas or the mainstream areas, then usually these areas lacks basic amenities like the hospitals, like the schools, like the police law and order, all right, and like the other kind of livelihoods, all right. And these are basically the economic and social backward areas, all right. But there is a one challenge in this, and what was that? Like, however, we tried to get them indulged, maintain their custom, provided them special kind of socio-economic development schemes, and showed the well-being. But when we decide that which areas, which tribes should be considered or should be provided the safeguards under schedule and tribal area scheme, then basically we had certain criteria. We had the certain criteria. And what is that criteria? That is the population percentage threshold. Again, I'm repeating, that is the population percentage threshold. Like we know, the Bhuria committee, when it was reappointed in the year of 2002, because we know for the first time it was appointed in the year of 1995, submitted the report in the 1996 when they introduced the PASA Act. PASA Act stands for the Panchayat Extension to the Scheduled Areas. But when they got reappointed in the 2002, then they had a task to identify the criteria through which any area could be declared as a scheduled and tribal areas or could be declared eligible or valid points. Okay, then we know when the Bhuria Commission submitted the report, basically they formulated the population percentage threshold. Okay, they formulated the population percentage threshold. And even in the example that we had discussed, like if there are 10 areas, okay, out of these only the 3 areas crossing the minimum percentage of 50%. For example, like we had taken example, the population percentage threshold is 50%. If the 3 areas crossing the tribal population with more than 50%, those areas would be included in the scheduled and tribal areas. Rest 7 that had the scheduled and the tribal population, but they were not crossing the threshold. They would not be eligible, not be declared as in scheduled and tribal areas. Thus, they do not have the population. They had, all right, but still they couldn't be included. Why? Because they are not fulfilling the criteria. And like when we were talking about the concerns at the level of 2, when we were discussing about the absence of viable administrative units, then I had told you that basically various ST majority areas are there, which having the ST population in the majority. When we, you can say, bifurcated the population mixture there. Okay, because we know in India there is no homogeneous population, there is a heterogeneous population. So when we bifurcated this heterogeneous population and we found that basically STs are having the higher percentage, majority. But if they are still not crossing the threshold, even after having the majority, we couldn't declare it as a viable administrative unit. Or the safeguards, the provisions, you can say the benefits of Article 244, Schedule 5th and 6th could not be applied. All right. Because of this, these things are happening. All right. Not only the socio-economic, but also the well-being of these communities are affected just because of certain criteria and the fulfillment reasons. All right. Thereafter, okay, there is a one question that I'm going to ask you is that if we are talking about the population percentage, then just tell me there is what is the total population of scheduled and tribals in India? This is the question. What is the total population of scheduled and tribals in India? To answer this question, again, you will have the 30 seconds to think and answer. And your time basically starts now. Just think about it. In the very beginning of this series, we had discussed about it. So I'm expecting the right answer. Okay. Okay, the 10 seconds have been passed off. Last 20 are remaining. Last 10 seconds are there. Okay, the time, sir. The correct answer is 104 million people. How many people are there? Total 104 million people are there that are the scheduled and the tribals in the total population of the India. Okay. If we talk about the total population percentage, okay, like so far we had talked about the total population, that is 104 million. Now, if we compare it with the population of India, then what is the percentage of the tribal and the scheduled population? This is going to be the next question that I'm going to ask you. To answer this question, again, you will have 30 seconds to think and answer. Time starts now. 10 seconds have been passed off. Last 20 are remaining. Last 10 seconds are there. All right, the time's up. Correct answer is 8.6%. The correct answer is 8.6% is the total population percentage that is lies under the scheduled and tribals and living in India. Okay, please remember these facts. So if we talk about it, it perpetuates the poverty and the marginalization. The poverty basically signifies the economic and marginalization signifies the social. How? Because those excluded tribes, those excluded people that have been excluded from the preview of Article 244 because of the population criteria, these were not entitled to get the economic benefits that are promised under the Article 244, which means that they are primarily depend upon the raw forces and raw forest produces, and that basically signifies the poverty. Marginalization, why? Because the social security schemes that we usually give to the tribals and the schedules under the Article 244, that is also not applicable to them. Okay? As the tribes basically lack access to the key resources and special protections that would enable them to improve their livelihoods and quality of life. In the previous lecture also, when we were talking about the things like the land acquisition, rehabilitation, and the resettlement. Okay. So basically these safeguards are only applicable to those who are included under the Article 240. Okay. Like you can say, suppose if there are 5 villages that are included the Article 244. There are another 5 villages that are not included the under Article 244, sorry. So when the research began, okay, after some time it was found both the areas A and B. A had 5 villages, B had 5 villages. A was under the purview of Article 244, B was not under the purview of Article 244. So when the research began, it was found that basically both the areas A and B had the mineral resources that are important for the nation. Okay. So when the land acquisition process, when the rehabilitation and resettlement process began, then basically the site A that had the 5 villages that were under the purview of Article 244, those would have the almost every safeguard. It means that the price of compensation would be calculated on the 5 times of the market value in rural areas, 2 times of the market value in the urban areas. Okay. Even there would be a time-bound resolution. Okay. It means that from acquiring of the land, resettlement and compensation, they should be done within the time. There would be a emotional damage recovery amount like we had discussed. Basically, this is EDR. The emotional damage recovery is given to the person because he has been, you can say, thrown out from his property or his land or his property basically acquired by the authorities for some specific reason. And what is the percentage of this amount? This is the next question. What is the percentage of this amount? To answer this, again, you will have 30 seconds. Time starts now. Ten seconds have been passed off. Last 20s are remaining. Last 10 seconds are there. Okay, the time's up. So the correct answer is 100% of the compensation amount. Like we had discussed, if this is a rural area, okay, and the market value is rupees 10 lakh, okay, so the compensation would be 5 times of it. It means rupees 50 lakh would be granted as a compensation, okay. So the emotional damage recovery or EDR would be the 100% of the market value, compensation value. Then 50%, the 100% of this would be 1. So that would be a 1 crore or 100 lakh rupees would be given to the person. Similarly, if the property was in the urban area, okay, and that was of the market value of rupees 10 lakhs. So 2 times of it, it means 20 lakhs would be given as an compensation amount, right? And EDR, the emotional damage recovery would be 20% more as the 100% of the compensation amount. So total 40 lakhs would be received. Okay. And even when they were required to be migrated, then there you can say the settlements would be prepared. All right. Then the basic communities would be ensured and this kind of safeguards would be there. But the side B, those villages were not under the preview of Article 244, but they had the tribal population. But because of the population criteria, because of the standards and all, those area is not included under the Article 244. So when the land acquisition would begin there, so this kind of provisions that are available under the Fair Compensation and Transparency Act and the Rehabilitation and Resettlement Act, these provisions were not applicable for them, even after they are the tribals. Okay. Second thing you can say, the next act that we discussed there, that was the diversity. You can say Biological Diversity Act 2002. Like we know, when we talk about the tribals, so basically the tribals are mainly depend upon the forest, okay, upon the natural resources for their survival, okay, and they are totally dependent on it. Got it? When the you can say the concept of biodiversity began in India, like the 1970s to 1980s. So the first thing that we had started was that conserving the biological areas. Okay. And the biological areas basically having the 3 zones: the core zone, the conservative zone, and the transition zone. The transition zone is the most outer one zone. Okay. Where you can, if you ever visited the national park, for example, if you ever visited some kind of national park, so you can say, when you go to the national park, you have seen that there are the hotels, shops, malls and all near the national park, right? So that is called the transition zone. It means the transition zone is the least protected zone and basically open for different kind of human activities, commercial and non-commercial. When you enter the, you can say the national park, okay, when you enter there, then you have seen that basically you will not see any shop, you will not see any hotel, you will not see any kind of residence and all. Why? Because that is the conservative zone. All right. And even when you opted for the jungle safari, like the national parks generally gives the jungle safaris and all, when you opted for the jungle safari, then you must be known that they take you to the deeper forest, deeper areas, right? They usually take you there. So basically taking you there in the deeper areas, deeper zones, okay, that is the core zone, okay, and no kind of human interaction, no kind of human activity is allowed to the core zone, okay. So remember, every conservative area or any biological diversity, or you can say the national park, they have the 3 zones: transition zones, open for the human activities, commercial and non-commercial; conservation zones, no human activities; core zone is the highly protected zone. Okay, so basically this is not only applicable on the people that are from the mainstream like me and you, but this provision also includes the tribals that are living there. Okay, so now how the tribals would be survive? Because as we know that since the starting, they have been purely depend upon the natural resources they are getting. Purely depend upon the natural resources they are getting, purely depend upon the forest they are living by. Alright, so where they would be go if we protected the entire area, if we protected the entire region, right? So basically to handle this kind of situation, the scheduled and the tribal areas, if they falls under any national park or falls under any biological reserves. So still in the Biodiversity Act 2002, they had some privileges. Okay, it means that with some conditions, they are allowed to use the natural resources, forest and all. Okay, for their livelihood, for various kind of things. But this provision is not applicable when it comes to the tribal areas and the tribal population that is lies outside the Article 244. It means if they falls under any biological reserve or the national park, then they would be simply asked to leave the place. Okay, that's how their lives basically affected. Thereafter, next one was the need for the recognition and the inclusion. Next one is need for recognition and inclusion. It means that they must be recognized by the government as the importance and viable schedule in the tribal, and then they must be included under the preview of Article 244. Okay, it means there is a pressing need to recognize the right of these tribes and include them in the preview of Article 244. Because technically, if you talk about the Article 244, then the Article 244 provides the 2 schedules that are specially designed to help these peoples who are living in the scheduled and the tribal areas, right? Basically, that was the main aim behind formulating such kind of article. But if the scheduled people, if the tribal peoples are not protected under this article, then what should be the significance of this? Okay, just because we have some threshold, just because we have some criteria, and as per the criteria, that area is not falls under the category, it does not mean that we should go with this. Okay, and we should exclude certain tribes and certain schedule from the preview, but we should include certain tribe and certain, you can say, population in the Article 244. Okay, so that's why the bureaucratic challenges and the bureaucratic mechanism basically look after the indulgement of these tribes that have been excluded. Because as we know, almost the 59% population that belong to the schedule and the tribals, they have been excluded. Now you can see that this number is not a small number that we could neglect. This number is a huge number in itself. Okay, that's why this requires the proper addressing of the bureaucratic mechanism and the bureaucratic challenges. Okay, and also ensuring the creation of viable administrative units that can be effectively administered to needs of these areas. Why? Because when the government declared any area as a scheduled tribal area, the first thing that the government will do, that is less intervention and almost no intervention. Okay, that's the thing. So students, basically in this lecture we have finished till here. In the next lecture we will continue from here. Till then, just revise the facts and figures in the proper manner. Okay, so with this note, let's end this lecture, and what we say in the end, we say thank you.